Good morning, Deb Watson, and this morning we're painting a puppy. You're going to need some browns. Whether you use 2 browns or mix your own doesn't really matter. I'm going to start, now that I've got the drawing on, with the foreground. I want the foreground to be a nice warm color so that it comes forward. And I'm starting with the first wash, just wetting it with some clean water. And I'm putting a bit of kind of like a raw sienna color. I'm going to be painting things in layers today, working light to dark. Here's a little bit of a burnt sienna color. And you notice that the shadow is not the same all the way across. Where that ear is hanging down, there's almost no shadow at all. Now you need the real dark that goes underneath the puppy's feet and mouth. But I'm not going to get it with it being this wet. So I dry it a little bit. See, the shine is off the paper, but it's not completely dry. And I'm getting a darker color on. You can use a tube black, you can mix your own blacks, but you really need a nice dark value because these shadows are what's going to make it real. And once again, notice that there's no shadow under the ear. And very little of the burnt sienna under the ear. Now for the background behind the puppy, I want to show you doing a wet in wet wash. I'm wetting it down with just a little hint of color so you can see what I'm doing. I'm using a big wash brush. This is a 3/4 inch silver black velvet. And I'm not getting very fine detail around the puppy. I'm just wetting the paper. And then I tip it and get all the excess water off so there's no standing water. I want the paper damp because I'm going to be giving it a couple washes. Here's some Quinacridone gold. And here's some transparent pyrrole orange. You see, I'm just getting that on because the next wash is going to come on top. And while that's still wet, right into that, I'm putting some dioxazine purple. These colors are all from the Core High Chroma sample set, which I mentioned in the last lesson. And now, did you notice I'm switching to a smaller brush so that I can get up and create some of that hair-looking texture around the puppy? So I'm not doing a lot of brush strokes. I'm just putting the color into the other color, and then I'm going to tilt the paper. So doing a wet on wet wash can give you a very lively, beautiful looking blends of color. And if it doesn't dry dark enough the first time, you can add more paint or repeat the whole thing. So there's enough water and enough paint that it moves around a bit when I tilt the paper. So I'm letting gravity do the mixing. And I could have left it like that, but I'm coming back with more dark. And blend that in with mixing too. And since the bottom has totally faded out, I'm re-wetting it and putting in more color. Magic hair dryer. Okay, for the first wash on the puppy, I'm just painting all the parts brown that aren't white. And I'm using a very light wash of brown. One part of his ear is very light, almost white, so I added water where that will be. And this wash is not dark enough to cover up my drawing. My pencil lines are dark enough I'll be able to see them through this wash. And I'm going to leave the white part of the eye white this time. You can lift up the white part of the eye or use your Pro White. So having a good drawing really helps. But I'm going to show you another way where you can use an iPad or a phone so that you can really see what you're doing. The first wash isn't about detail, but I do try to get it kind of fuzzy looking around the edges. Straight lines don't work well when you're painting fur, so go for those jagged edges. For the nose, I'm using my own mix of black. When I did a video setting up the palette, I ended up with a lot of black. And I have videos on how to mix black. But I'm just giving, once again, the nose is also getting a light wash so that I can see my lines through it. And that's the first wash on these. Now, the areas in the white, you're going to need some shading on the paws. So I'm using a little bit of my black mix, watered down. And I lightened that up a little bit, even suggest a little bit of the shadow in the white fur. Now that's going to dry lighter, but you can always dab it up if you think it's too dark. And you can see to get the detail in the nose and the features, I just got right to Pixabay and pulled up the original photo and enlarged it. Anyone can do this. It makes what you're painting a lot easier because you can see what you're doing. And at some point I'm going to mix this black in with my browns. Now for the eyes, I just paint the whole eye black, a little really dark brown or black, and then I'm going to lift it up at the end. I know there's lots of ways to paint eyes, but just painting the whole thing dark and lifting up typically gives me excellent results with very little work. And that's what I like. The eye on the right has a shine on the edge, besides just the white of the eye. The white part is actually the dog's third eyelid, or second eyelid, which dogs have to help protect their eyes. On this dog, it's fairly white. On my dog, on Edgar, it's kind of a reddish color. There, I wanted to get his pupil in, so I'm going to leave that for the minute, even though it looks a little odd. Now that the nose is dry, I'm putting on the medium layer, the medium value. So we have light, dark, and medium. And there's a little bit of dark on the left-hand side. So getting those real darks in is very important. and will give your pup shape. Now for the paws, I can't tell exactly where everything is on the paws. I'm just painting what I see, putting in the value. And I can't take that eye anymore. So I paint them both a dark brown for the minute. Now I'm coming in with the darker values on the fur and going to get in the darker fur areas. And once again, there's no straight lines. And you can mix from brown to black to gold. But I'm working on dry paper and just working on values. The fur on his ears is longer, so it's getting some longer brush strokes. So there's several areas of darker fur on his head and around his eyes. And what that is just shading that gives you the shape of the dog's face and head, plus his expression. Now I'm just putting some freckles on his nose. I'm not following the picture exactly because I think these little dogs look so cute with their little freckled noses. I'm also giving him some hints of shading in the white area. But I want it to be very light because I like his white muzzle. And there's some shading right here where his eyes are deep set. Now that this is dry, I'm coming back to make his fur color richer and just have more color because it dried a little bit wimpy. So I mixed up more of a burnt sienna color with my orange and purple. And I'm also rubbing a bit so I can soften some of the hard edges. Now for his eyes, I'm softening up the edge on the white. And I just re-wet and rub to lift out a highlight and a little line under the pupil. That leaves it darker around the edges, and I think it just works really well. So now that these colors have dried, I'm going to give this shadow a little more emphasis and come back with some white wherever you think it will help. You notice I haven't given any shading to that big white area on top of his head. I'm saving that for the last. It's very hard to judge values, so I tend to save those really highlight areas for the last bit of the painting. That way I can be sure I get them right. I make him a little bit fuzzy. And you can put the white on and then come back over it with some brown once it dries, if you want to get some lighter lines in. Now I'm coming back with some color, because I don't think his ear is really white. I think that's just the sunlight hitting it. And I lift up the little corner of his eye so that this one big dark mass is more believable. So you can do all kinds of little brush strokes to suggest fur, or you can just go with color. Working wet on wet will give you soft edges, but it's difficult to get enough color and value in there. When you work wet on wet, it tends to dry lighter. So layering works extremely well with watercolor, especially for fuzzy puppies. I hope your pup turns out great. Happy painting!